Kia ora, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening and welcome to Citizen A. We're at the week's current affairs with the best political team on television from a very, very, very Auckland perspective. Warning, we're as fair and balanced as Fox News. Joining me tonight on a revolving panel of bloggers and Auckland opinion shapers. She is from the Auckland University Television, Film and Media Department, the greatest blogger in New Zealand history, Phoebe Fletcher. And he is a man about town, Western Bay's advocate and reformed lounge lizards. Mothers, lock up your daughters. It's the charming Mr. Jeff Houtman. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, Issue 1, election results. What now for National? Do they have the mandate? Will the Māori Party cut a deal with the Nats? How is the media coverage? Issue 2, Labour Party leadership. What do they need? What will they get? Issue 3, the occupation in RTS Square. Won't somebody think of the children? Is it time to evict these peacenik hoodlums before they spark independent thought? And we'll end the show on a final word, but let's kick things off with Issue 1. National's historic 48% party vote is an extraordinary result, and Labour's plunge to 27% is political amputation. The people of New Zealand spoke, but what did they actually say? Phoebe, National can claim a mandate here to sell assets, can't they? It wasn't like John Key didn't tell the public that he wanted to privatise 49% of state assets. Sleepy hobbits reap what they sow, don't they?
I mean, I guess one of the things with MMP is that they probably have less of a mandate than it actually seems. I mean, the way that it's been pitched in the papers as a kind of landslide victory, well, that's not really quite true. I mean, if you look at the 2008 election, there were, 12 or 13 seats that were fairly marginal and won under 2,500 votes. And that's enough to kind of swing an election. So, some of the way that this has been positioned as being an absolute landslide, I don't think that's quite the case. I think we're waiting for
48% from 45%.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a really good benchmark victory under MMP, but the thing is that we're still waiting on the special votes, and National may lose another MP off those special votes, like they did in 2008 with Cam Calder, and we may see, I'd say it will probably be a New Zealand First or a Green MP that will come in once the special votes are counted.
But that'll remove them from 60 to 59, still requiring United Future, ACT, still have that majority.
Yeah, and I mean, this is one of the arguments that's been proposed, right, is that United Future and ACT were also talking about private-public partnerships in terms of assets, although, really they're just one MP each.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
I mean, that was a remarkable thing about this election, that was no matter what happened with the policy, it really just did not affect National's vote whatsoever at all.
Do they have a mandate?
Well, they're going to argue that they have a mandate, and I think with the Māori Party, you are going to see them come in behind because, Tariana Turea has already said we have no choice. We couldn't stop this if we're in opposition, so we might as well work with them. And they've got whānau ora, of course, that they would not want to lose the funding for that. That's already rolling in motion.
Jeff, despite using the police to gag the media and giving credibility, shattering justifications for implementing 4 search warrants on our largest broadcasters, New Zealanders love John Key so much they voted in John Banks and Peter Dunn. What won't New Zealanders do for John Key?
Okay, now I've got to take issue with you. Did they love John Key, or did they just not have a choice?
Okay, what do you think?
My theory is, and I'm blaming a lot of this on the Labour Party, for not putting up an electable leader. Because there was something like, in the numbers before the election, there was somewhere between 74 and 80% of all voters didn't want asset sales. And you go, well, that's great, then don't vote for National. But a whole lot of them went, well, who else am I going to vote for? So they voted for National. And here we are today with John Key claiming a mandate. Does he really have a mandate, though?
So you would say it was a lack of an credible opposition?
Yes,
is this where
it was a disorganised opposition. It was like you turned up early for training and the other team were still on the bus sorting out their socks and stuff, and then the whistle blew.
You and I have known Phil for years, lovely guy, been in Auckland. What was it that didn't fire for him?
He's great at certain things. Like he'd be what was his big thing? Was he foreign minister? Or foreign minister. Fantastic foreign minister. Love to see him as foreign minister again. PM? No.
What is it that you're required to be PM? Is it that magical charisma?
It's magic. It is magical charisma. And Key, even though sometimes his eyes are, sort of dead like a 3-day-old fish.
Very dead eyes.
Yes,
eyes.
It's horrible.
Spooky.
He has some charisma, or at least he has more charisma than his competitors. And that's what wins in Tallyland.
He has amazing comedic timing, doesn't he?
He can crack a couple of jokes.
A question to both of you. This was shockingly one of the lowest voted turnouts since the 1880s. Should the head of the Electoral Commission resign for such an appalling result? Should they resign? 66%?
I don't think the head of the Electoral Commission should resign. I think it's kind of what Jeff was just saying there, that there was a lack of a credible opposition. And I think one other thing that you've got growing in youth at the moment is that you've had the growth of the Occupy movement. So you've had these kind of alternative ideas of democracy. And I mean, this is just sort of anecdotal, but what I was seeing on Facebook was, you know, sometimes up to 173 likes was this idea that you don't vote because we need to get rid of the system, which is kind of an anarchist idea from way back. But I think what you had there was, you know, people that didn't feel motivated to vote. I think that you had the left strategically voting much more than the right did. They exercised that kind of breadth of MMP, but you also had a lot of people that didn't turn out. And the fact is that if you're older or you are wealthier, you are actually much more likely to vote.
66% turnout, surely someone should get dumped from the job of Electoral Commission.
No. I'm with Phoebe on this. It's not the electoral people's fault. They had the ads out there. They told everyone enrolled. They did everything that they were supposed to. I think a lot of the time people didn't vote because who else are you going to vote for? I'm not going to vote for John Key. I'm not going to vote for the other guy. I'm just not going to vote. We need to move next year when we do that electoral constitutional review.
Yep.
We need to move to a 4-year term.
Yep.
We need to do the Swedish system where you have all your elections on the same day every 4 years. So that's local body and parliamentary. And they have, I can't remember the number now, I'm a bit Phil Goff on that, but they have a huge percentage of people, like their voter turnout is mentally huge because it's only 1 day every 4 years. You go in, you do all your voting, and then you go to the pub.
4-year term, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it gives people a bit longer in terms of planning. But I sort of get the sense that in terms of the people that I know that didn't vote, that they actually felt confused because you had a 1 month kind of build up to the election. You had the Rugby World Cup, right? And then we had 8 parties that were perceived as, you know, potentially getting above the 5% mark, that were releasing policies constantly in competition with each other. And I think that there were some people that found that confusing.
Overloaded?
Don't we need a comprehensive strategy to lift participation rates if universal suffrage is to be realised? Wouldn't lowering the voting age to 16 with a civics course taught in school alongside enforcing the election day itself as a public holiday to lift participation just as starting points?
I mean, those sound like great ideas. I certainly think that civic studies should be taught at school and there should be much more of an emphasis placed on it than there is now, particularly as we don't have that youth vote. Although, you know, not having that youth vote might suit certain parties at the moment.
Jeff, we live in a consumer culture where everyone believes they are a future millionaire. Has National tapped into an aspirational cultural zeitgeist that goes beyond traditional politics?
No. Dumb luck.
Really?
They're in because of dumb luck, just because the way the cards are falling. Now, just what you guys were just saying before about making a public holiday for election day, I think that's a bad idea because then all of a sudden you've got a long weekend and we're going to the beach. Oh, forgot to vote.
Currently, that's a point. But currently we do have law that allows for all workers 2 hours off on election day for them to go and vote.
Which is fair enough.
Maybe if we enforce that.
Oh, no, that would be a good thing to enforce. But if you want to up the voting even more, and this won't cost very much, everyone who votes gets entered in a lottery. If you vote, you are in a lottery, just like Lotto. It doesn't cost you anything. You go and vote, you're in the lottery, someone wins $1 million, someone wins $100,000.
It's a gamble. A gamble for democracy.
It's a raffle.
Although you might get what you get in Australia there. I mean, there is, even in places like Australia where a lot of people vote, you get a high proportion of donkey votes, right? Where people are just, you know, listing in numbers. They go 1, 2, 3, 4 without actually thinking it through. So that is also a problem as well. I mean, I think studies in schools.
Question to you both. After 3 years of giving John Key open-mouthed kisses as interviews, did the cult of no personality continue during the election campaign? When does the media honeymoon end?
Well, I think the media honeymoon did actually end for a portion there with the teapot takes. And I mean, this is, you know, that was where it really swung. You do not attack journalists, and I guess that's a problem that Winston had much earlier from his campaign last election, where he'd gone kind of gung-ho on the journalists. But no, I do think that you know, like Jeff says, there were opportunities there where Labor had, you know, been handed things, but you had Gough and Cunliffe fudging their numbers. So, you know, I don't think that the media weren't uncritical. I think that the pace of things was very fast due to that kind of ping back from the Rugby World Cup. But I don't think that they were trying to hand it to Key on a plate, and I think that there was certainly that moment there where National had really irritated all of the journalists.
Is the honeymoon over?
Yes, it is. TVNZ, you know, John's best friend, and New Zealand Herald, John's second best friend,
yes. BFFs,
did not appreciate being searched.
Right.
I mean, they are still in a state. Is the fourth estate still an official estate? And to do that before an election is stupid. It's utterly stupid. You do not want to annoy the media like that. So I think from now on, he's not Mr. Solid Gold bulletproof guy anymore. He's a politician and he's a target. And I think for the next 3 years, I mean, I know Winston's going to be super critical, but the media should be on Key's case every day for the next 3 years as revenge, if nothing else.
Yeah. Thank you, panel. Moving on to issue 2. Phil Gough has done the decent thing and fallen on his sword, leaving the leadership race between the three Davids. Question to both of you, why did Labor drop to 27%?
Because people didn't trust Phil Gough as a leader. They didn't see that he could compete with Key in today's messy economic environment, and he didn't have the charisma and those sort of things. And the Greens cannibalised them. The Greens ran a better campaign. If you notice that the Greens Labor numbers, they're the same numbers. It's just moving people from one side of the thing to the other side. They didn't steal anyone off National. Didn't steal anyone off ACT. It was just cannibalising from Labor. That doesn't help the left at all.
Why did Labor get 27%?
Well, I'm going to say something completely different here, because while I agree that Gough wasn't seen as such a leadership option, I think that, you know, he really didn't get the sort of media that Key did over the last 3 years, obviously. But I think the major issue was that this was an election fought on the economy, which actually favoured the right. Okay, if it was an election fought on something like health and education, that would have favoured the left. Whereas, you know, if you looked at those Herald informal polls that they had on their website, 50% of people said that they were voting on the economy. Now, that is a really incredibly hard argument to make when you're in opposition, to be able to pull out Excel sheets and say, these are my numbers, and explain them cohesively. And that is one element where I think that Labor were really on the back foot. I do think that they tried really hard to come up with policy, and Gough went sort of down fighting, and good on him for, you know, keeping up the fight. But I think it was very hard. I mean, like, you know, it's things like if you looked at the mood of the boardroom debate that they had on the Herald, what you saw was Cunliffe getting up there with a PowerPoint every 2 seconds with numbers and figures on it, whereas English could just jump up and say, well, look, you know, overspending is a habit for Labor, and that decimated their argument.
Jeff, Auckland Central stayed blue.
Yep.
And Labor Party vote collapsed in West Auckland. How did Auckland go from a Labor Party stronghold to a national, to a marginal National Party city?
I'm going to say the rural urban drift. I guess it's the rich moving to Auckland. I guess the rich moving into Auckland Central especially. But my electorate, Auckland Central, which was the original Western Auckland, the original West Auckland back in the day, has got richer. And a lot of the people who've got richer are Liberals. They've got $60,000 houses that are now worth 1.7 million or whatever. So they've become insanely rich and having a good time, and they want to keep that going. They're still Liberals at heart. They're still Labor voters at heart. But Nikki Kaye did a really good job the last 3 years. And although her Jacinda fought well, and Nikki's majority is smaller, Nikki did a great job as an electorate MP the last 3 years, and I think that's what people rewarded her for. It wasn't about the colour. It was about her as a person, knocking on every door, doing all those cases.
She does that door knocking better than anyone else in the game. Phoebe, the Labor Party coven, likes Parker because he has woven their philosophy into Labor policy. The public like what they saw of Cunliffe during the election, and Shearer has picked up support because he isn't Parker or Cunliffe. What do each bring?
Well, I mean, basically, you've got Shearer and Cunliffe that have got seats. That's going to be an issue because that was always an issue with Cullen, and I think that's something that Parker is going to face. Cunliffe, now that it's come out that members of his own caucus don't like him, it does not matter whether that's rumour or what, you know, that is going to stick around now that you've got Duncan Garner and other people calling bloodbath and front page, you know, articles on the Herald saying, I have friends. But I think Cunliffe, you know, as an ex-diplomat, he brings, you know, quite a good ability to relate to people.
Yep.
I think Parker brings strong policy. I think Shearer brings something new, and he is potentially the wild card.
Yep.
I mean, it's really difficult for us to say outside of Labor because we're not sitting in the caucus, and that is where the decision is going to be made. But, you know, they have a wonderful public relations coup going on here, don't they, with the three Davids? You know, it's a nice kind of platform to be able to publicise that leadership transition.
Who's your call for deputy?
Who is my call for deputy? I mean, it really depends who gets leader. So, you know, I mean, if Cunliffe was leader, Parker would be good. Okay, we've got, you know, names like Nanaia Mahuta and Grant Robertson thrown in there.
Yep.
If David Shearer was there, then it's possibility that Cunliffe or Parker could be deputy. So it's actually really difficult to say at this stage.
He's throwing his head
Yeah,
in. What's the
Shane
call?
Jones. I mean, that again is a possibility. I mean, it really depends on what way the caucus goes. And I mean, this is not really a public contestation. This is a private one that is occurring behind closed doors.
Jeff, if the question is who can beat Key in 2014, not who's liked inside the caucus most, who can actually beat Key in 2014, which Labour Party candidate is the answer?
There's only one. David Shearer.
Really?
David Shearer. He's got star quality, right? Now, Key had star quality when he was a brand new boy. David Shearer is relatively inexperienced in politics, which is fantastic. He's not hooked up with any particular union. He's not going to get stuck in all that backroom stuff with the Labour dudes. He is a leader.
Yep.
He looks good on telly.
Yep.
He's got a fantastic backstory. People love that. He's got the moral high ground. Now, if he brushes up his stuff, he could rock it because he's the new sexy cool dude, not Key. Key's old news now. He's a second-term Prime Minister. When's he going to get kicked out? Shearer.
I mean, that's just in terms of the public, though. But the
Oh,
problem
yeah,
is
but
that he
it's the
doesn't
public
have
who vote.
experience.
It's the public who vote. It doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter who in Labour likes him or not, and the political factions in there. I know the caucus chooses, but the caucus, unless they want to be in opposition for another 3 years, should be looking at what the public
this
want.
time. Like, if you look at their list, they had so many good Labour
That's
MPs
right,
that
you got
dropped off
nailed.
the bottom.
That's
Like,
right,
you know,
that's
you
right.
have people like Andrew Little that are
Yep.
gone this term. So, I mean, you know,
then
we can say it's the public, but it's also what the
But was
internal
Andrew
factors
Little part of
Labour.
the problem? He's the head of the EPMU, right? He got involved in the whole Hobbit thing last year to up his profile. He's clearly part of some of the union factional stuff, and Labour's got to get past that.
I think that you're right, Shearer is a star, but I think Cunliffe's got the intellect and the front footing in the media. But I certainly think that Shearer, you'd have to bring, whoever wins, right, whether it's Parker or Cunliffe, because I think it's between those two, Shearer would have to be brought into education, wouldn't he? Because that really is the portfolio that is born for him. And especially if you're looking at him as a potential leader for the Labour Party, education would be a great place to start.
Yeah, but it's not time for potential leaders now. It's not time to put someone in and then put Shearer in. It's time to put Shearer in now and set him on Key's throat for the next 3 years. That's what the time is. And if he wants a running mate, you get the Robertson, the guy from Wellington. Great guy. Split it between Auckland and Wellington, or someone from the South Island. You give the other two Davids big shadow minister positions. You could keep everyone happy, but Shearer's the key.
Let's hear your prediction. Who is going to win? Who's going to win?
Oh, it's a hard one. I mean, I think that Shearer, I do agree with you. I think he does have that star quality and he could absolutely take on Key, but I think it's probably going to be Cunliffe.
What's your call?
You guys would know better. I don't know the difference.
Tell me what your heart says. Tell me what your brain says.
Okay. It's whatever Labour wants. If Labour wants to be in opposition for another 6 years, they'll go with Cunliffe or Parker.
Yep.
If Labour wants to be in opposition for 3 years only, they'll go with Shearer.
I say it's a Cunliffe thing, and I think that past the 13th, we'll see how it goes. Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 3 tonight. Is it time to evict these peacenik occupiers from RTS Square before they spark independent thought? Jeff, we all love protesters. Oh, we love protesters, and we love protesting. But it's costing us tens of thousands of dollars now. What are ratepayers to think?
Well, I mean, I like the police's attitude. I like how the police are like going,
We don't want to get involved in this at all.
we're not doing this.
Yeah.
People are trying to pass it off to the Waitemata Local Board, whose area it's in. Waitemata Local Board are like,
We're not touching this.
not us.
Yeah.
The governing body's like, well, we haven't told you to get rid of them. It's council officers.
Yeah.
Unelected civilian council officers of some persuasion who want to get rid of them. Now, if the RTS Square dudes are damaging the grass, give them some watering cans. Get them looking after the grass.
I mean, I think the issue is actually the structure of
Of
the
the
Aotea
Occupy.
Square. Like, no, well, I mean, this is,
Or the
you know,
physical
the
structure.
badly architecturally built place that was going to collapse if it had too many people on it. So what they're worried about is the tent pegs, you know, piercing the membrane of this shonky structure that they spent, you know, millions of
$80
payers' money on.
Yeah. It was a very, very poorly designed square, wasn't it?
It was a very poorly
redesigned as
but
well.
I mean, I think that
Bordering on a kill zone, really. That's how bad it is.
I think that Jeff has got an interesting point here, because if you look at the way that Occupy protests have been managed around the world, I mean, this is beginning to change in the United States, but there were different approaches to the way that, you know, the protests were handled. And potentially the worst, of course, was New York with Bloomberg. But the thing is that these protests have been designed or have been thought out. You know, they've come off like things like the Egyptian revolutions. You've had people like Anonymous in the back there, the computer hackers, right? And one of the things that they learned is that you can take these moments of violence and make them iconic images, and then these go around the world really quickly. Yep. Okay, so for example, I did a blog on Occupy Dunedin, and that got retweeted to 150,000 followers within 8 minutes of me doing that blog. So this is how
the greatest blogger in New Zealand.
How rapidly stuff circulates, right? So, you know, if you look at the LA City Council, they did things like they bought the protesters anoraks, you know, they passed legislation that made them able to camp there, or the Toronto police were tweeting them and saying, thank you very much for your approach. And in Dunedin, they did that thing where they swapped the whole protest for one tent. So I think it has to be a you know, a mellow police approach. I mean, they didn't do that in Australia, and what you saw was that on, you know, the Washington Post, everywhere it made the international news. We've just spent a lot of money on the Rugby World Cup branding New Zealand, so I think it's very important that we do take a smart approach in dealing with this.
Phoebe, surely real leadership here would have the Auckland Super City taking the bill to Wellington and forcing the government to pay for the cost of the occupation, as it is John Key's unjust social policies that are creating the obscene inequalities that are driving the occupation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in a lot of cases the bill has been overinflated. Like, what were they saying? $1 million at first, now it's 150 to 200,000.
Take it to Wellington.
Yeah, take it to Wellington. But, you know, I think the problem is that the leadership doesn't understand what the protests are about, and I think that the best way to deal with them, and, you know, let's face it, this is a global movement now where people are drawing off global strains of discourses that are circulating around very quickly, is that they have to find a way to open up the discourse. I mean, even in New York, if you look at New York, for example, 50% of the mayoral candidates for 2013 that are Democrats have been arrested. So Bloomberg has got a problem on his hands in 2 years' time because they're actually proud of it. So I think that what you're seeing is these images flying across borders, and they need to find a way to open up discourse.
The reality is New Zealanders are pretty laid back as a folk, aren't we? Whereas we're almost horizontal, we're so laid back. We don't get angry about things very quickly. And the economy, while it hasn't been fantastic in New Zealand, hasn't gone as badly as it has overseas. Yep. If things start to tank, though, I mean, if we're looking at the global economic situation at the moment, and it is getting pretty severe out there, things tank and we do get higher unemployment, lower growth. You had the re-evaluation of our growth rate this week saying, look, things aren't actually nearly as rosy as the Treasury is predicting at 2.6% GDP. If that starts going down and people start feeling the pinch much more, are you going to see more protesting? You're going to see more people joining the occupation movement in New Zealand? Or is it still just the hardcore activists?
It's the. I mean, have you been down to Occupy Auckland?
Many times. And we've seen the faces that we've probably been seeing for the last 20 years, right?
Yeah, I think in the global economic ooze that's happening, the good thing is that we're a food positive nation, right? There's 4.2 million of us, but we produce food for 60 million people, right?
That's right.
Now, when you start cutting down expenses, you cut everything down except food. You can't do without food. So even if the whole rest of the world goes to crap, we've always got extra food that we can swap for, you know, some oil or some whatever. So ultimately, we're going to be fine. It's about how much the New Zealand 1% is going to hoover up of everyone else during this crisis. It's going to be the real tipping point, and that's what could lead to something more serious than a protest.
Question to both of you. If Auckland City Councillor Cameron Brewer sends in the police dogs as a response and forcibly evicts protesters, will that guarantee him the mayoralty?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's a hard one, isn't it? Because he's appealing to a different audience than, I mean, he was the one that actually said that they don't need security there. And I think that was the right decision. That was one of the dumbest things, putting security around a group of people that are fundamentally peaceful. They're complaining about the cost of the fences. They didn't need the fences, okay? Maybe for the night of the Rugby World Cup where that became an additional fan zone. But it was an overreaction. Yeah, I mean, possibly for the audience that votes for him, it could be. But I don't think it's a wise idea. And I mean, I think that part of the reason the police haven't gone in is because people have had charges in the past for police abuse, and they have won a lot of money. So that is one reason why the police are being very careful around this.
Are we going to have a...
Brewer's insane. Can I, are you allowed to say that on this show?
In your opinion, the lovely fresh-faced, baby-faced Cameron Brewer appeals to many, many Aucklanders.
Cameron Brewer, I think, was possibly one of the only 2 Auckland councillors who didn't go along with Len on his plan, right? Who voted against the latest budget thing, right? Which means a lot of people who voted with the budget are righties. Okay. Now, Brewer is still stuck back in the I'm right, all the left is evil, and conversely, I'm left, all the right is evil days, where that's stupid politics.
We're across the divide.
Yeah, we're at a thing now where the left and the right and the centre all have great ideas. Let's just steal the good ones, right?
Yeah.
Forget about Cameron. Now, obviously, he wants to be mayor.
Oh, yeah.
But he's not going to be mayor.
Really?
He's not going to be mayor. No,
we're 2 years out.
He's too smarmy. He is too damn smarmy, and I think even certain righty voters who might go for him, all those sort of O'Raki types, just a couple of them just want to just wipe that smile off his face.
I think he'll cross to the National Party, won't he? Because he was going to.
He almost
did.
He
was tipped to announce his candidacy
Tamaki,
for
didn't he?
So I think he's probably more likely to go there next election.
Let's wrap the show with last word. Phoebe, your last word this week.
Well, my last word has to be the Denniston Plateau and
the
Bathurst Resources mining 160 kilometres open cast mine on conservation land.
Unbelievable.
First day of back at government. Kate Wilkinson, what are you doing?
Unbelievable.
It has to be my final word.
First day back. First day back.
I'm sure she looked at her office door and it said Minister of Conversation.
Yeah.
And she's like, I better talk to those miners then.
Your final word tonight.
My final word, I was going to talk about how important it is to look after your local neighbourhood and sort of things that looking at things at a sub-local level and looking after historic architecture and trees and all this sort of stuff. But I'm afraid it's more important to tell the few people who can vote in the Labour caucus to vote for Shearer. Now, I'm not a member of the Labour Party. I never have been.
Perhaps you should be.
Well, I don't know. Let's put Shearer in charge and see what happens. But if they really want to start kicking some ass, and they do, Shearer, Shearer, Shearer.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Phoebe. Ladies and gentlemen, to my final word. The New Zealand Herald is the most biased piece of right-wing trash I have the displeasure of reading. But their analysis of the low voter turnout makes Paul Henry look balanced and reasonable. The New Zealand Herald says that the low voter turnout was simply because many had decided the election was a foregone conclusion. Really? You mean to say that the 3 years of deeply flawed Herald Digi polls that claimed National had 60% support convinced people to not bother voting? Because National only gained 47% of the vote, meaning all these inflated poll results for National manipulated public opinion. It didn't represent it. The reason the New Zealand Herald want to minimise the low voter turnout is because it's in their corporate philosophical interests to have low voter participation rates. For the New Zealand Herald, who has been the chief propagandist for John Key to point to a perception they themselves helped create to minimise the appalling low voter turnout, is like a drug dealer blaming the addict for overdosing. If you like tonight's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded news citizens, and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook page. Thanks for watching, whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.